Hi, welcome to Building Renaissance Leaders. I'm your host, Victor Vogel. Well, this is a question and answer podcast. Uh, what does that mean? That means I've already done a podcast associated with the Renaissance Leadership Odyssey. I did it back, I think, around March 12th. You can go take a look at that on my channel, Building Renaissance Leaders, if you would like. Um, in that process, we cover the basics of the Renaissance Leadership Odyssey program and format, what we're doing, what we're about. Uh, and then I open that up and let people provide comments and questions and things like that on the video or on other social media platforms that I run the program on. And so then I get a series of questions that always seem to come back to us and about a particular podcast. And we use those questions to generate this podcast, which is basically answering some of the questions and gives you a little more detail, usually because of the questioning format. We're talking about Renaissance Leadership Odyssey. What is it? And uh, well, that's one of the questions. What is different about the leadership Renaissance Leadership Odyssey program? So it's a lot to put out in there. And what is that? And then another question was, so why do we even need that? I mean, we've got all kinds of leadership stuff floating everywhere. People are all over social media doing leadership. Uh, Everything is, you have coaches, you have mentors, you have all kinds of access to leadership development. You can Google and get probably 5 billion articles on leadership. So you say, why do I need leadership? Well, you're going to find out why today. And then the other question was, so what is kind of break this program down for me? How would that work? If I was someone wanting to learn about leadership, how would this impact me as an individual? If you're a small business, and by the way, 99% of the registered businesses in America are small businesses. When we talk about business, everybody's always thinking Amazon or Google or Apple or Kaiser Medical or Chase Bank or, Devon Oil or BP Oil or, CBS, ABC, whatever. Large corporations, thousands of employees, but all of those corporations and thousands of employees that they hire really don't constitute a large percentage of the total workforce out there. The vast majority of the total workforce are with companies that have 1 to 20 or 1 to 50 employees. And if they're 1 to 100 employees or more, then you're probably in a mid-sized business range, but you're still considered in the small business world. And that is the vast majority of people are out there. I am a consultant who spent most of my 35 or 40 years in that realm of consulting. After I got out of that realm, about 35 years, I spent about another 10 or 15 years consulting, and I consulted with those, but I also consulted with small businesses, the local restaurant, a lawyer's office, and or a medical facility or something like that. And in doing that, I realized these people don't get the kind of leadership development those large corporation makes. An individual leader would not be able to afford me as a consultant on an ongoing basis to be with them and help them through their daily activities, even for like 3 weeks, would be thousands of dollars. So they can't afford that. The companies paid for that. employees did. The leaders within companies did not pay for that. The companies paid for that kind of consulting. So when you look at an individual, chances are they're not getting this kind of development unless they go to work for large billion-dollar corporations, and that may not be their thing. So they may go stumbling through their career, not getting a chance to learn much about leadership at all. Small businesses, a restaurant, might have a manager, night manager, and a head waiter who kind of oversees 5 or 10 other waiters, and a chef back there with some cooks and stuff like that. If you're in a restaurant, or bartender if you're in a bar, uh, these people most likely don't get the kind of development that we're talking about here, that was normally set up a lot of times for billion-dollar organizations. They just don't get that kind of input in their life. So what I'm trying to do is put together materials, information, podcasts like these, podcasts like the original ones that are public, and then books and resources and other links to other podcasts and other information that people can go and in a systematic way that if I were working with you, I would be saying, okay, you need to spend some time looking at this. When we get over that, then we'll talk a little bit about how you're transferring that. Now let's go look at something else. In a sort of a systematic way, I'm trying to put that together with these podcasts, with any kind of references and resources we have available, and then give you this model called the Renaissance Leadership Odyssey. What is Renaissance? Renaissance is created like in the 12th century to when people were coming out of the dark ages where things were run by the primarily theologians, and it was monarchies, and everybody was controlled, and it was everybody was, there was no education, there's no sense of why things were going on, and then we came out of that into what was called the Renaissance era, and people began to start discovering and learning about the sciences and the arts and literature and music, and there was a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity, a lot of excitement, but there was also a lot of fear, a lot of trepidation, a lot of concern. What does that mean? Why would we believe that? That kind of stuff. And it kind of reminds me of where we are now. We're going into that age where a lot of things are going on. We're not sure about them. AI popped on us, and it caught us all by surprise, and we're kind of wondering. It's wonderful and exciting in one way, but scary as hell in another way. So that's kind of the way the Renaissance in the 12th century was. So hence Renaissance leader, because the leadership that's going to have to cope with this in the future, and it's going to get more complicated before it's not going to simplify. uh, Leaders are going to have to be able to cope with a lot of this kind of stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So that was sort of the premise of why I put Renaissance. Now, Odyssey is the idea of a journey that's exciting and different, and something's happening around every turn. You think of Gulliver's Travels, and it's excitement and challenges, and you learn and you grow, and out of all of that. But it's scary and exciting at the same time. So that's kind of what we're trying to set the learning process up for leaders to cope with the future, the renaissance that's coming, or actually that we're probably in already, but it's just going to get more interesting. And leaders are going to have to approach things considerably differently than what we've been doing for 4 or 5 decades during ages of the Industrial Revolution and the retail and service industry segments. And then we went into information, and now we're in the AI and technology and science. Uh, so those previous stages allowed for a more stable, stochastic, standard approach to leadership. This is not going to be what's needed in the future. And what we're finding out is we're seeing some of the earmarks of that. So we'll get a chance to look at that. But that kind of give you an idea where the Renaissance and the Odyssey came. We're going this program is designed for you to be on a journey to become a leader. It's not something that's going to happen in a 1 or 2 hour podcast or a 4 hour or 5 day week training program, or even a month or 2 month long training program that you go to and get certified in something. It's going to take longer than that, and it's going to be more immersive than just you going away and or taking an online course or going away somewhere for 2 days and sitting in a classroom for 8 hours and then partying in the evenings at Orlando somewhere. Uh, so that's what the journey is about. It is truly an immersive, grasping journey into learning some things that you probably haven't been exposed to yet in leadership programs. So that's the Odyssey and the Renaissance Odyssey. Now to the questions. So well, I actually, let's start with the first question, and that is, why do we need to even think about doing anything different than what we're doing? And so there's some things I think are interesting about that. And the first thing is we spend I mean, there's a lot of money out there being made on leadership development. There's a lot of people are spending large sums of money. So I want to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. So here from ResearchCom, this comes from the Training Industry Source 2820. So that would be the source of the data collection. It says global investments in the training industry. Now we are looking at dates from 2010 to 2019. Um, if you go back, you can go back even further and you would see an inclining trend. And in 2010, we were spending somewhere in the neighborhood, those are billions of dollars on the left side, 260 or 270 billion dollars on training worldwide. Uh, we're spending about in 2015, just 5 years later, we were spending something like maybe 50 or 60 billion dollars more a year for training, and that'd be around 350. And then 3 years later, it went up about another $10 billion to 360, and stayed pretty much at about 360, 365 or something like that in 2019. So this is no small adventure. How did this happen? Early on, when I first came on board with leadership, uh, I I was involved in a company called Electronic Data Systems coming out of the military. And I really enjoyed that company. It was a very exciting company. They, uh, they were heavily engaged and highly sought after company to work for. A lot of great benefits, cars for you to go to work for, gas paid for, college education paid for, healthcare 100% covered. It was a pretty phenomenal benefits package that went along with a salary package, and not anywhere close to where people are making today for what I was doing back then. But the salary package was really good. And certainly the combination of salary and the benefits is greater than what we're paying people today without those benefits or partial benefits. So in those days, you love you love talking, you love working for EDS because it was a company that people sought after. They wanted to go to work for EDS. When I was a recruiter, and you could line up the people on college campuses that were signing up to interview with electronic data systems when I'd go in and interview. Have a story about that, I'll tell you later. But my point is this: lots of money was being, or some money was being spent, but not near the money that was being spent, and that was in 1972. Not nearly the money being spent uh, as we are today. And what happened was companies began to outsource everything. Began to cut benefits and all that too, but they began to outsource training, and they began to outsource recruiting and selection. And as the 80s and the 90s evolved, there was less and less of that done in house by the company, hiring people to do that, and more paying outside resources to do it. And consequently, it got monetized. So as it got monetized and people built businesses around this, we now have a full industry that is making that kind of money annually. You know, people are spending billions of dollars annually with these companies, and they become monetized. And then the question uh, people really kind of started asking was, are we getting anything for that? We're spending billions of dollars. Is all that training and all that leadership development and all that other training, is it delivering anything to us? And so what happened is they started measuring that. And here's what they were finding. This came out of the Journal of Applied Psychology, picked up by the same research company that goes and just looks at information like this. Uh, out of all those people who went to training, and they went for training, some of it was for leadership development, some of it was for other stuff. But out of everybody who went away and got trained, or money was spent on training, uh, and we're beginning to see probably more of it was external than internal. Uh, when you took a look at, for example, leadership's behavior, they went to leadership training. The did the leadership behaviors change? Is there anything different about how the leader was behaving that improved, so to speak? And we found out that less than 30%, around 29% of the people who attended those courses had some sort of leadership behavior change. Now, another way to look at that is about 70% didn't. Maybe a little more than 70% according to this chart, but for sure, 70% of the people, their behavior didn't change at all. So then the question was, were they learning anything from those courses? And that got worse. Then it dropped down to about 25% of the people who attended programs and learning and training learned something. That means they might have picked up something new or different that they didn't know. Well, that smacks of what I was finding out in a lot of my research and a lot of my development as I was doing things, talking to people, etc., researching articles, etc., for 5 or 6 years, several hundreds of people. Uh, that's about pretty much on course. Most people didn't feel like training delivered anything. Either they were sent to training and they kind of were forced into it, or maybe the training was more of a motivational tool because the training happened in San Diego or Las Vegas or Orlando, Florida, where Disney World is, or Miami or someplace like that. Where the nightlife was good and the entertainment was good, and you spent as much time doing that as you did learning. But anyway, most of these people came back. Only about a quarter of them uh, came back and said they had actually learned something. So then the next question, well, is that doing anything for the organization at all? And we have the same kind of percentage of people who felt like maybe there's something about the organization was changing because of these leadership, probably because the same percentage of those people who were changing behaviors and learning something were impacting the organization about that much, but it wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot of people who were actually doing something that really helped improve the organization. And also now we go, well, what about overall job performance of that leader or that person who went off to training? And it drops even more. Now we're down around 19 to 20% of the people who actually went and conducted the training or went through the training, came back, and their job performance, only about 19% of the people were changed, their job performance improved. That'd be a way to look at it. That means a large percentage did not improve that went. So then, from a leadership perspective, for if you were sending people off to training, whether it was an hourly employee or a leader, but from a leadership perspective, this would be one of the reasons you would go to training is to improve your ability for you to connect with your subordinates and deliver better outcomes. But even if you were one of the subordinates that went off to training to learn a technical skill or something like that, what we were finding was that subordinates' outcomes, their ability to improve their performance and change uh, was considerably less. So we're now keep in mind, I want to go back. We're spending billions and billions of dollars, and we are coming up with uh, basically no performance improvement. You know, or we come up with some, but for billions and billions of dollars, we didn't seem to be making rapid progress that we should have been making at the time. Some of that is because a lot of the stuff we've been training is consistently the same. And when people offer it, they offer it as something new, but it's not really new, it's just repackaged. It's just repackaged, renamed, taught from a different angle, however you want to call it. It's just repackaged. But empathy, we would call emotional intelligence today, was the same thing we were training back in the 70s. It said, treat people the way you'd like to be treated. So now we know a little more about empathy. We know a little more about why, but people aren't really picking up on that part of the training, which is why we're going to be different. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So that also led to a piece here that I picked up. I thought this was pretty interesting and probably told the story. Now, remember, we're spending millions of dollars, and I just told you the impact is not real great. But according to the data from the Chief Learning Officer Business Intelligence Board, that's a group of people who study things like this. Nearly 95% of learning organizations either plan, that's learning organizations, the people who are providing it, plan to increase or maintain their current investment in leadership development. Meanwhile, the trainingindustry.com says that leadership training is costing about, well, looks we were pretty close, $366 billion globally, industry wide. There's high growth organizations are focused on improving their talent. And that means enhanced programs for emerging leaders that in the future. Yet the yet, and that's an interesting word. It's one of those I got you attention. Yet data provided by McKinsey, which is one of the the big five consulting firms, offers a startling insight into the leadership industry. Most of these leadership programs fail to create desired results. We just saw that. We just saw that. What's keeping leadership out of your organization, despite the best intentions of management and management consultants to turn that tide? What is keeping the performance from moving down into the organization? With an estimated $166 billion annual spend on leadership development in the U.S. alone, organizations must transform these mission critical programs to create real and lasting impact. They've been saying that for decades. This is not something uh, that has been a problem. And so, what's causing this? What's causing this lack of transfers? And what is the impact of that? What's going on here because of that? And so, one of the things we find out here, this is these following slides are from the Gallup 2023 overall assessment of how the state of things are in the world. Uh, and there it covers a lot of stuff. But one of the things that was covered I found interesting was employee engagement. Okay, so this graph shows the percentage of engagement, employee engagement in U.S. The world and best practices organizations. And look at some various gaps here, but consistently across the board, starting back as far as it looks like 2000. It's a little hard for me to read even here. 2000 up to 2022, 30% of the employees say they are engaged. That's a small amount of people who are engaged for the hundreds of billions of dollars we are spending to train people, and the 166 billion just to train leaders in America. Now we see a dip somewhere around the 28, 21, 20, or the 2020, 21 era, and that's due to the pandemic. But you can see it's not the pandemic that is the problem. It's been going on for decades. But there are companies who do have highly engaged employees. These we call best practices companies. They implement best practices approaches. Somehow these companies have found the secret to getting employees, probably maximizing that in training and converting it into their organization. But these are very few companies. This is not a large amount of companies. And most of them are the larger corporations more so than small businesses. This is what's happening relative to spending a lot of money, but somehow it's not being turned into performance. The question becomes, why are people not engaged? And I'll put a link to this whole study, the full 2023 study, so you can go look at a lot of things and learn a lot of things in the description of the podcast video here. Here are just a few of the things that are probably common to you. Look at employee satisfaction. It doesn't get up over 30%, and it's normally in the 20s. And then it really took a nosedive when the pandemic hit. And it's been a nosedive since the pandemic. We've had these real debates about working from home or going back on site. But it's deeper than that. You can see it's much deeper than that. This is not a problem that was caused by the pandemic. It's been ongoing for decades, and it's low. You have over 80% of your people probably that aren't on average satisfied because the trend is indicating this. And in all these areas, the trends are indicating that things are not happening the right way for us to use leadership development or training in general to improve performance. And certainly isn't helping people be satisfied. But what would happen about, does my opinion account for anything? The answer to that is about the same as employee satisfaction. These are things you see are areas why people aren't satisfied. And there are more, and I'll let you read the report because we don't want to take up all the time here to just go through reports. Although they might be interesting for you, for people to do that. It's because facts are hard to get around. You know, you can feel good. You went on training, everything felt good. It was good. I loved it. I loved everything about it. I just don't use it. That's basically what's going on out there. But it's going on to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of people being trained, and still not getting what we need out of that program. So if you ask why, I think we need a paradigm shift. This is why, because we've been doing the same thing for decades and decades and decades. We've been paying more and more, and it looks like we're planning on continuing to pay more and more. And we're probably going to come up, if we don't do something different, we're probably going to come up with the same database we had 10 years from now. We'll be doing the same database. The problem is the world, the external world around us, isn't sitting still like that. It's increasing, becoming more complex, creating more stress, creating more changes. Upheavals are going on, troubles, division, all kinds of things are happening around us that are impacting us even more, but we're not being able to take the training we get and transfer it into a form that lets us become better at handling that kind of stuff. What makes it so that's the why. So the next question is, what's kind of different about what we're proposing in the Renaissance Leader Odyssey program than what's currently going on? What are the things that are going to really kind of make the difference between the two programs? And so the difference between what we're proposing is something that we actually missed and are continuing to miss for the most part. We're getting better at it, but we're continuing to miss it, obviously, at the three quarters level. uh, and that is, we haven't spent much time. And I'm just going to focus on leadership because I'm not a specialist in skills training or technical training, so I can't speak to those people. But I'm suspecting something similar is going on. But uh, we are not spending enough time in the leadership world where we focused on leaders, the leaders themselves. Who are they? What's in their background? What makes them think the way they do? What makes them behave the way they do? What makes them more prevalent to behave this way versus that way? We don't spend any time in leadership development talking about that. That's really the biggest factor here. That's the biggest factor we're going to be changing in the Renaissance leadership. How does that work? What's that about? I was trying to put together a quick video to show you here from Andrew Huberman's podcast called Huberman Lab. He's a neuroscientist and professor at the University of Stanford. And he several of his podcasts focus on how people are behaving, what's impacting people. And one of those segments had to do with the brain, the nervous system, and the body, and how they interact with each other, and how they impact how you deal with the world that's around you. And this whole concept of neuroscience and coupled with behavioral psychology, performance psychology, and sociology, and some some discoveries in the interpersonal communication world began to come to light at the end of the 1990s, 2000, early 2000 era, and have exploded, moved forward faster in this last 3 or 4 or 5 years, uh, where we could actually attach electrodes to the brain, ask people to behave, or get them angry, or get them calm, or whatever they were doing. And what they would do is these attachments we had to the brain and the MRI concept allowed us to be able to perceive what parts of the brains were firing, what new neurons were moving and acting and connecting with each other, and things were happening in the brain. And so we began to see what's happening in the brain. And it's a collection of different parts of the brains doing things that impact not just your brain, but also they impact your chemicals in your body, testosterone and estrogen and other kinds of chemicals in your body that cause you to react or behave, which in turn impacts how your brain is affected and how you deal with that. And we began to learn that um, when you're using your brain as a leader, there are some things that you bump into that maybe you're just highly, totally resistant to. And a certain segment of your brain that is designed to protect you and or to cause you to hesitate, uh, focus on sort of maybe making you resistant or making you be hesitant. It's the kind of thing that's a side of the brain that once you touch a stove and it burns your hand, the next time you get close to a hot stove, your mind says, stop, don't go near there. Okay. And you don't overcome that because it protects you. But that same kind of thing that's going on in the brain might be telling you to resist something new that you need to learn because it'll help you, but you're resistant to it. And that part of your brain has become so dominant for you that you can't open up the other sides of the brain that tend to make you feel good, feel calm, feel collective, take in information more readily, more in a more casual way, so that you can look at it differently and maybe see things from a different angle. And maybe that stuff they're presenting isn't as bad as you thought it was. But you first have to stop your thinking process on that side of the brain that says you're resistant. And that's where positive intelligence comes in. That's the psychology of it. We are not spending time helping leaders understand how they think, how they operate, how they work in stressful situations, how they overcome things that their body tells them, and through their heart rate increasing, all that kind of stuff. It makes you very uncomfortable, but yet you can overcome it. But it makes you hesitant. It makes you not want to. So how do you overcome that? And that is the part of the brain process and the part of the training that you can train. You can actually train your brain to stop thinking that way and start thinking a different way. And there's exercises you can do for your brain. They're finding out if you exercise your brain, that's part of your brain that calms you, etc., that it becomes stronger, and it'll be less overcome by any of those resistance or blocking segments of your thinking processes that you've been using for years. And you can overcome those. And that then opens you up to a wider breadth of potential opportunities as a leader. From that standpoint, what it tends to do for leaders that we're not doing now, obviously, from just looking at the data we saw, uh, it allows a leader to know enough about themselves so that when they see leadership things that are taught in a class or whatever, they can assimilate it. So, what's that mean? So, if you have a glass of water, that glass of water is healthy and it's clear and it has properties that are, healthy, and it's good for you. You know what that will do for you. But if you have an upset stomach, they used to have something called Alka-Seltzer, and you could drop that into the water, and it would fizz up for a little bit, and then it would be clear again. But it had different properties. There was more to it. It was stronger. It had more capabilities now. So when you drank it, you feel better. So when you're assimilating information, you're doing the same thing. You're taking in newness and stuff, and it becomes part of you that it was you were good in the beginning, but now this has provided you even more in-depth insight. So you take that, you assimilate that information in as you're learning, and you then look at it and you struggle with it, and this is where you need to have your mind be checked from resistance and open to clarity and clairvoyance and calmness and creativity and pleasure, even. Uh, as your mind is able, when your mind goes into that state, the receptiveness to receiving, assimilating, and internalizing that information to where now it becomes part of what you believe is correct and right to do. Then you've internalized that, so you know so much more about yourself, and you know why you know more about yourself because of your history and because of things that have happened to you over time, plus things that are going on now in your life. You know enough about all of that now to take that information you've learned, and you know enough about who you are to be able to personalize it. So what that means, so if you're learning something like empathy, okay, and you take the empathy assessment, and it says you don't really show empathy to yourself. You don't have you reject or you resist empathy feeling. It seems to be maybe it's a form of weakness to you. You see it as being weak. Well, the likelihood you're going to take a class in empathy, and then if without the kind of training we're talking about here in Renaissance Leadership Odyssey, without this kind of training we're talking about, you're likely to take training on empathy. You'll understand the definition of it because it'll be grilled into you for 2 days. You'll actually see a definition of it. You'll see it in demonstrated in a video. You'll probably even get a chance to role play it a couple of times. And because of the definition and because the person's trying to help you see that, you overcome the person with empathy, they're in the role play, they're trying to show you how that will work and how you will do through that. And, but if you haven't had training to help you understand why that, to open your mind up to resisting that and just not liking doing it, uh, unless you've had that kind of understanding and development before you take that training, you'll get that same information, but you'll take it and you go, okay, so I know now what empathy is. And I go back to my group of people and I go, okay, so I need to be empathetic. Let's see, who can I be empathetic? Oh, theirs looks like a chance you go over. Uh, I understand that you're feeling bad today. How's that? And that comes across like a lead balloon because it's not you. They don't know you that way. You haven't been that way to them. So when you go back and try to apply it, it's totally insincere. In fact, they may be concerned about you. They may be concerned. They may have empathy for you. They may be concerned something's wrong. So it comes across the wrong way. It's incongruent. And communication is like we're saying this, but nothing about how we're acting or feeling in the nonverbal sense sends a signal that you actually are caring about what's going on with this person. You don't know how to be empathetic because you're not empathetic even to yourself. So, as you train in these areas psychologically, you begin to be able to discuss and work with other people and work with professionals and small groups to understand how to make empathy work for you, to understand it's okay and to learn and grow from that. And then the next time you go back down there, you're not going to apply it like you learned it in school. You're going to kind of apply it the way you really feel about empathy, which it comes across sincere. It comes across as though you really mean it. Because it's coming from you, because you've had the opportunity not just to go through a course, but before that course, you've had an opportunity to learn about yourself enough to allow that information to be processed. That's one of the big differences between the Renaissance Leadership Odyssey. You're going through an odyssey, you're going through an adventure, a learning adventure that starts with you before you even touch leadership stuff. And you'll see how that plays out down the road in helping organization. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But there you go. You've got all of that stuff happening. Okay. So that's one of the big things that is a difference. The other big thing is you've got to learn how to interrelate with people. And to do that, uh, I think you have to communicate. Now, most people have never been taught how to communicate. You think you have. You I don't, you basically you've had grammar, you've had language, you've had spelling, and possibly you may have had a debate class or something in high school, but you avoid all that other communication stuff probably. And what you learned was to listen and hear, to speak and hear. But you didn't necessarily learn how to communicate. Nobody talked to you about the concept of when you're talking with another person, the meaning of the message you want that person to understand is in their mind. It's in the meaning of the message is in the mind of the receiver of that message. Now, you think about that a minute and you start dialoguing about it, all kinds of things come out about that, like the differences between people, how you communicate, what kind of barriers get in the way of all of that. And there are tons of them that you have to overcome. But if you don't know they're there, if you don't understand them, if you don't understand how they interfere with messages, if you don't know that 90% of the meaning of any message anybody perceives that you provide them comes from your nonverbal verbal reactions, then and only about 10% from what you actually say or type or send in a letter. So if you cut out a visual perception of communication, you cut out like 90% of that meaning. I had fun with this with my granddaughter. Oh, I don't know. It's probably been about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I said, I want you to come over here with me and watch Granddaddy because I want you to tell me what you think Granddaddy means, okay? And she said, okay. So she was intently looking at me, and I said, yes. And it didn't take her long. She said, you mean no? I said, but I said yes. And she said, yeah, but you meant no. And it was that nonverbal cue. And that's how it happens. I mean, my own personal experience in workshops of doing that and tests, small tests like this, probably 85% of the time or more, it's the nonverbal cue that's telling people what you really mean. We don't think about that on a day in and day out discussion when we're talking. We don't think about how close we are to you. We don't think about the proximity we are with you. We don't think about the facial features. Do we look gruff or do we look happy or do we look nuts? you know, yeah, all of these things impact you during your communication. So you have to learn how to improve your communication in order to take all this newfound you and be able to communicate it effectively in a way that's influential with your employees or other people. Okay. And it's communication is always a cause of conflict and frustrations and things like that you're dealing with on a regular basis. Okay, it can get in the way of empathy. It can get in the way of empathy, or it can enhance empathy. See, so communication becomes a part of that. So that has to be part of the elements you're going to learn. It's one of those uh, what I call three pillars. It's that you have to master. You have to become pretty effective at it. The same way you have to really get to know yourself way. So we have the sociology, or I mean, we have the psychology, and we do that through. Some neuroscience evidence-based system that's tied to something like positive intelligence. Interpersonal communication is tied to learning the concepts of what's going on, what's happening. I mentioned Dr. Huberman, and one of the things I realized is when you're active listening, you're trying to put yourself, you may be putting yourself into a certain environment that your brain and nervous system isn't coordinating, it is not sensing, and your body is tightening up, and you're not reacting the way you need to react while you're actively listening. That comes across in nonverbal signals, and the person on the other side of the table knows exactly that you're not listening to them because you're not they're looking for you to stay calm and collective, and you're tense, and you're wanting to move on with the conversation. You think you want to get past this one point. They're not ready to get past that point, so you are at two different points of mental attitude and body reaction that is impacting that concept called active listening that everybody likes to train, but they leave that part of it out of the training. They don't help you to understand who you are and why you may be cutting people off short, what it is about how you think that causes you to do that. That's part of the variance between having an active listening course on a traditional 2 hour active listening course and how you tend to think. Think about the DEI, the equity, and the diversity programs that are out there, and the people they send people to them, and they come out of those things going, diversity? Are you kidding me? They're not thinking. They haven't. Their mind is already blocking. That saboteur is already in there blocking your perspective that you don't want to think about a different way to look at that program. You go in there already convinced that you don't want to hear it, and you're not going to hear it. You're not going to hear it. But if you had the potential to take a minute and say, before the class started, you closed your eyes. You sat there for 30 minutes and you or 30 seconds and you just concentrated on your breathing. You could feel your actual feet inside your bottom of your feet. And if you concentrate on how does the bottom of my feet feel on my shoes now, while you're taking a small breaths, inhaling and calming yourself. If you do that enough, that exercise quickly will convert your mind. You'll find yourself hearing what that person is saying in a different tone. And it may come across to you differently. All of a sudden, you may wake up and say, we probably do need to do some of this. It takes time, it takes practice. It's not something that happens in a day or two or month or week. And sometimes, or even months. Sometimes it takes several months for you to get keyed in. Normally 6 to 8 weeks, and you're beginning to feel a change in how you think about things. That stuff does not get trained in DEI or DIE, however you say, diversity training. Nobody spends time doing that. Nobody spends time that ever been in a program where they simply took a few minutes out for you to think about who you are and yourself and how you would take this information and transfer it back down and actually go back into a resistant organization and be able to infuse that into something that actually changed performance in employees and you and the organization. Remember those measurements. Okay. You don't get that kind of training if you go get leadership training. They don't teach you how to infuse that leadership training into your organization. They don't teach you enough about yourself to know what are the barriers that prohibit you from doing that. And what are the strengths that you might have that allow you to do that and discuss how you might make that work more effectively. That's hardly ever part of a learning program today in leadership. So there you go. So that's some of the differences. The other difference is we're going to force through the structure of how we put this program together. We're recommending you stop outsourcing your selection process and your development processes. Bring them back in house. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use consultants in house, but bring them back in house and you control them. And I'll show you how that works in just a few minutes. Um, so that's part of it. And then consequently, you're going to look at the role of leadership differently. It's much, much more than the siloed controlling this group of people and delivering a product through these people. That's basically how we see leadership today. There's much, much more that can be done with leadership that enhances the whole organization. But you have to change how you think. You make things happen inside the organization. So, by the senior leadership, well, we'll talk about this in a minute. So, those are some of the differences. We're going to be changing how we look at leaders. We're going to focus on the person and the leader. We're going to focus on how to improve their ability to communicate effectively, truly communicate, not talk at each other, but truly communicate. We're going to talk about how that impacts the emotional intelligence aspect that's needed in people today to be considered valued, to know that what they're saying counts. That you remember people said their opinion didn't count. How do you make that happen? That's where the emotional intelligence aspects come in to the process, along with how you deliver that and communicate it, and you come across sincere when you're doing it. All of that comes out of that triage, that three pillar program that where psychology, sociology, and interpersonal communication are equally important and inextricably entwined so tightly that if you violate and you don't master any one of those, you more than say you get good at two, but you're not good at interpersonal communication. You're not 33% or 66% effective, whatever that would be. You're 85% ineffective because it's so entwined that when one falters, you exponentially impact the others also. So if you can envision that we have those three pillars, that whole process of changing mindsets and how we view the role of leadership in the organization, you'll see how that can be converted into impacting. So that's sort of where we are on that process of why we did that, kind of what's different than what we would do in a training program versus standard training programs where you get outsourced for 3 or 4 days or a week and you come back and try to implement it. Okay, we're going to bring it back in house, all of it. Selection, all of it comes back in house. It needs to come back in house so you can control it, so you're part of it, so it is yours. They evolve as you. They're working for you. They're not getting their leadership training from somebody that they don't know. They know this person. They're getting their training from. They worked for them for years. They see them. They know they're excited. So that's a big part. That's a big part of what we've missed and why we're struggling with engagement today. Why we're struggling with engagement. So those are some of the things that we have found deal with why and sort of what the difference is. Now, the other question is, how in the world does this work? how do you how do you get that big a change happening into your organization? And I would like to kind of take you. Let's see here if I can make this happen here. This is the how to implement the leadership Renaissance 30,000 foot level explanation. What you have here, your first phase starts with um, the idea that we're breathing a new life into your organization, and I think that's important. It's kind of like, okay, let's become better. Let's improve ourselves. It's like a rebirth, maybe. Uh, so we start with the executive team, and we run them through. And everything I do, everything at the very beginning of everything I've done for 45 years, I learned early on. Start with assessment. Find good quality assessment and do that first. And so what we have here is we start with the assessments. The programs I'm talking about, psychology, sociology, and interpersonal communication, all of those have groups who already have this kind of development set up that you can bring them into your house and work with you, and they can train the trainer for your people to continue to pull this together over time. But initially, you have to get started. So we start with and let's just say we're talking about a large corporation. Now this gets scaled, and once we go through it, you can see how it scales down to smaller size, like a small business or even an individual. But if you're looking at it right now, what's happening is your assessment begins with your executive team. You have positive positive intelligent assessment. That's free. I'll give you a link. You can go take that right now if you want. as soon as you're done listening. Same thing about emotional intelligence. There's some emotional intelligence programs online where the assessments. I recommend the Daniel Goleman, anything associated with Daniel Goleman. He's basically the almost a father of emotional intelligence, probably, he and some other folks out of Harvard. Uh, and then interpersonal communication, which is has been around for years and years, and there's a lot of people in communities that are engaged with communication that can help you in those arenas, whether they be local or whatever. And there's a lot of people online like myself who specialize in that area who can help you. So those three assessments are you take those. Those are online assessments, half hour, 40 minutes at the most for all three of them, or for each of them. Uh, and then, in addition, in this first phase, you will your executive team is going to sanction a whole organizational culture and leadership assessment. Now, I recommend a group called Human Synergistics because I used them for 35 years. I used them when they first started. They evolved. They got bigger and bigger and bigger, and I used more. I used them for a $25 billion, or not 25 billion, $25 million corporate transformation project that myself and some other consultants were heading up, and we use many of these larger consulting firms that worked under our guidance to do various things. But we handled that whole organizational culture and transformation process for that company. And human synergistics was an instigating tool to help us make that happen. So we use that throughout the whole organization to ready the organization to do other things. Uh, so they're going to give you a good insight, and it's a good balance to compare the culture and leadership perception with positive intelligence, emotional intelligence, interpersonal communication development. So you have a tool right there. That's just one comparison that's going to be used effectively to compare how effective you are with the Renaissance Leadership Odyssey program. You have a Renaissance Leadership Odyssey lead consultant. Now, that can be somebody in house or who knows a lot of this format, but most likely it'll be myself helping somebody learn how to do that first or working with me through a project, and then they'll be available for other divisions or whatever happens, however that would work, because this may happen in a department, it may happen in the whole corporation. But right now, we're looking at the whole corporation. So then part of this is establishing a communication team. That team is going to consist of people who are good at communication, and not just verbal communication, but newsletters, social media, the whole works. And they'll include a few people who are pretty good analysts, people who can take information, look at it, consolidate it, put it together, make it make sense to the average person who those communication people can help disseminate. They have a very specific goal as a communication team. And from the very beginning, from the minute we start, it's about transparency, the status of where we are, and the progress we're making. That's their job is to collect all that and get that communicated to the rest of the organization. Because the minute you start this, and as soon as the organizational assessment happens, word's going to start scrambling, rumors. And so you want this team ready to put that out, that put that to bed, put all those rumors to bed, get the facts, get the transparency, the status, and the progress out on a continual basis, all through all phases of the project. So that's their job. Okay. Each of these teams, the executive team, that they are by definition heterogeneous. Okay, and CEO, and you have the heads of all the other departments in your corporation. That makes them heterogeneous. Um, so they are going to create a team, and that team is going to operate like a support group. You'll see how that works in a minute. So then the communication team is going to do the same thing. They are people who are picked from all segments of the various departments in the organization. So they are then heterogeneous also, and which means they're mixed. They're from a variety of the pieces of the corporation, and they both they and the executive team will undergo what we call high performance team building, and that's really for them to understand how to work as a team as they're learning as progressing. And then the executive team is going to work with the consultants from the organizational culture and the lead uh, Renaissance uh, consultant, and they're going to come up with some criterion measurements. Criterion measurements are those performance measurements we should see better at the end of the process. The employee satisfaction, engagement levels, production levels, quality, quantity, profit, growth, and just about anything else you can think of that would justify in your mind, when you look back on what you've done and you look at these criterion variables and you look at your culture and your leadership levels, and you see the measurements of those improve drastically because of this program, you can look back and go, yeah, it works. And that is a powerful motivator for sustaining and resilience throughout the program. So that's phase one, and you start at the top of the organization. Now, again, if you're a smaller business, we're not talking about an executive team and a communication team and all that kind. We're talking about the owner, maybe a night manager and a supervisor of employees in the restaurant, waiters, and maybe the chef in the back with two or three cooks and a dishwasher people. So it's this whole process is exponentially simplified once you reduce the size. And if you go down to an individual person, we're simply talking about starting the assessment processes. You're not doing an organizational culture. You might decide that you could do a leadership survey. You can do an individual perception, a self-perception of your leadership through human synergistics, and they have a program to help you develop as a leader. So you could take that. I think it's $35 or $45 to take that as all. Uh, you could probably uh, find some other people to come into this program with you and create your own little subgroup. In fact, if you're going to do your positive intelligence, your coach in positive intelligence is going to require you to participate in a group there. Okay. And if you can't afford those segments and you choose to approach this a different way, you can approach the learning by buying the book, reading the book, uh, creating your own environment, etc. You can do all of that also. Uh, Kind of keep the cost down, but it's not an expensive program. But each of those have their own kind of programs you can attend. I know on LinkedIn they have some emotional intelligence programs that's really patterned after Daniel Goleman's program. So that might be a way of reducing the cost and also getting some people engaged to come in with you from a subgroup or a support group concept. So anyway, those are the processes. That would be phase one in this. We have the executive team, we have the communication team up and running, and everybody is on their way. When you think about the courses for positive intelligence, emotional intelligence, interpersonal communication, I want you to be thinking of those as because you see that's happened in the first quarter. So kind of think of those like taking a graduate level core uh, um, semester of graduate level work and you're taking 3 courses. You're going to have certain hours in the week. Some of those hours are on your own, some of those hours are meeting with your group, some of those hours are meeting with your coach, some of those hours are you're engaged in an app, for example, on positive intelligence. Yeah, there's some stuff that you need to do on a regular basis to sustain. It's the same way as taking a graduate semester of graduate work, and you're taking 3 courses. They happen to be positive intelligence, emotional intelligence, and interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication I'm putting together, and that is can and easily be done via 1 hour or an hour and a half one evening over 9 courses. You have something like 22 hours at the most of work over, say, the course of a quarter. And you would have a pretty good grasp of interpersonal communication. So, at least understanding interpersonal community. You still have to practice it. You still have to put it into gear. We still have to talk about how you put it into gear and things like that. But all of that is available. It's here. It's written. The assessments are available. Everything's there for you to use to give you what you need to get through the programs. It's not like we have to generate anything. So that's the first quarter. So we got the executive team up and rolling after 3 months. Then all of a sudden, we're going to take that on down to uh, the rest of the leadership in the organization. And again, when I say leadership, I'm talking about anyone who has somebody reporting to them who they have to get things done through those people. The leader has to get things done through those. That's a leader. I'm not talking about managers, directors. I mean, basically, I'm defining leader as everyone below the executive team, like vice presidents, directors, managers, supervisors, crew leaders. But I'm also including executives in that. They're all leaders. You get over this debate of whether somebody is a boss, if they're a manager, if they're a leader. You put all that historical 1970s stuff away. Everybody who is engaged in getting someone else to perform underneath them to get something done is a leader. They are performing all the same basic leadership concepts and need to understand the same leadership principles throughout the organization. That clarifies that. You're not worried about that. There's a lot of other ways you can take care of your growth patterns and the kinds of things you're going to do to increase wages and stuff like that. But when you talk about leaders, the leaders all have the same basic role. They may have different spans of control, etc., that affect their salaries, but they still have the same responsibility and the same focus, and that's getting things done through other people. And so they get the same program, and they establish heterogeneous groups. Now, this is where it might differ a little bit when you're thinking about it. The If you're thinking hierarchical structure, let me go back here for just 1 second. If you have this kind of an org chart, okay, if you look, that middle leader has employees underneath them. The other middle, if you spread that out, the other leaders would have employees underneath them. And now here's where we kind of differ in terms of training. Uh, when you when you form this group, your support groups, your leaders in the leaders section, all those leaders that you see across the center there, they come from different departments. They are all going to meet as one group. So you're going to have leaders from, you're going to have maybe leaders, you're going to have maybe directors, vice presidents, etc., uh, from different areas meeting in a similar kind of group. So if you had a bunch of, say, you had 10 directors, uh, HR, operations, finance, marketing, I don't know, security, what other else you could think of that you might have a department have. All those directors would be meeting as a subgroup. Now they may not be in the same location, so some of those meetings may have to be done either hybrid virtual or virtual altogether. But those groups will be meeting with each other. Those levels of people tend to think on the same levels. They're peer groups with each other, so to speak. They're going to be your support group for the positive intelligence, emotional intelligence, and interpersonal communication course. In other words, they're going to be your classmates. They're going to be your class in the graduate course. They're going to be the ones that they're all in your same classes, all three classes. And you're going to operate as a support group for each other. So already we're beginning to integrate the whole organization in a unified community way, as opposed to uh, just the HR department doing their people. Okay, the organization as a whole begins to integrate. So then you might have directors, you might have managers that have their subgroups, you may have supervisors that have their subgroups, you may have crew leaders that have their subgroups. So we're way down into the employee ranks, far more, far more than any other training kind of program that's out there. Okay. And I would recommend, if you're guiding this in house, and this is the best way to guide it, so you don't have a bunch of other competing consulting firms trying to tell you to do different things, you're in control of it. You have your whole group, top to bottom, is consistently trained the same way. They're consistently trained the way you want it to happen. Okay. So these groups are all managed and controlled. It's not as hard as you think because you're not doing it day in and day out every day. And you'll have your schedule set. You'll have your class. After you do your class, you'll have some things to do on your own. You'll have some things to do with your groups um, for support purposes. And this is flowing down all the way down to the actual hourly employee workforce, what people consider the hourly employee workforce, supervisors and crew leaders. Same thing. They're getting the same kind of leadership development the CEO got. My God, how don't tell me you're not as important anymore. You're getting the same program the CEO is getting. Then we establish the heterogeneous groups. We also do the team building with them, so they get a lot of that. And the RLO courses, they are all being consistently done throughout the organization. This happens through over a course of 6 months, the second and third quarters. So, some of them will start before others, etc. But towards the end of the 6 months, they'll pretty much all be completed in one way or the other. Okay. Again, you're getting a 30,000-foot view of this. A lot of this is built to be flexible and customized based on what that CEO and what those executive teams want to have happen. So that's the second and the third. Now, the fourth phase is you come in after probably the year and maybe a couple months past it, somewhere after everyone has thoroughly been gone through the programs and pretty much associated with converting those in and transferring those into actual actions and behaviors. We're going to come back in and do a reassessment uh, of the organization. And that happens towards the last quarter, at the end of the last, probably more than the end of the last quarter, maybe the first quarter after the year. Towards the end of the first quarter, we'll probably come in and do a reassessment of positive intelligence, emotional intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, and see if your PQ scores, your EQ scores, and your communication scores are rising. In other words, you have learned, you are doing, your behavior is changing, and there is measurable performance increases based on that. Okay. So, uh, we're focused all those we're taking a look at these teams. We're going to encourage the continuation of these teams throughout the organization so that you can use them for sensing information, strategy analysis and development, and goal setting, and all those other kinds of things are better done when they're done heterogeneously, and everybody's concerned about the health of the company. Because if you're concerned about the health of the company, in fact, uh, what's going on when you're concerned about the health of the company is that you, by definition, are um, engaging the whole corporation towards one common goal. And the people at the bottom of the organization, well, people throughout the organization, but primarily at the bottom of the organization, their engagement means something. What it means is that they know that you value them because you're consistently communicating with them and you're consistently using them. And they're consistently engaged in the assessing and evaluation of how things are going. It tends to engage people to the point, and they do it because one, their ideas are valued. Remember, that was one of the things. And two, they're probably having more fun. They probably enjoy the company more. So their satisfaction levels are probably going to be up. And the third one is that uh, you're meeting those needs that say Maslow hierarchical structure says, the Maslow chart on. Uh, they're not worried about survival because they're generating enough where the company feels comfortable in providing them the information and the rewards for their work that they put into this effort. The companies put that into the system. So they're sensing that. So then the next area is that if the company is continuing to do well and they're sensing the companies do well, their security is much more solid. The likelihood for layoffs or anything like that is pretty slim. But even if you did, you could look at, even if something unwildly expected, like a pandemic, you have the options of figuring out as a whole organization how to do that without destroying everybody. Okay. Because you got so many minds and so many people interested in the company surviving. There's survival, there's security rests on that, and they feel very good about that at this point in time. So they're willing to go in and work with you to deal with all those emergencies that pop up. And then thirdly, they're growing. So you may, as an organization, may have to figure out different ways, different succession planning processes, so to speak. So you may have a manager who's a great, or a salesperson who's a great salesperson, and traditionally they get promoted to manager, but nobody bothered to find out if they were good leaders or not. This is how the whole flattening the organization was going on in the 1990s. And it was like, we're going to eliminate all middle management and we're going to push this stuff down to the hourly employees, and they're going to have the authority to make their decisions. One of the dilemmas with that process was they forgot to ask the employee, do you want that responsibility? They just assumed they would want it. No, they didn't. They wanted the leaders to be leaders. They just wanted to be valued in part of it in a different way. They wanted to be valued more, but they wanted the leaders to lead, and they just wanted to do the work. They didn't want to put up with all that decision making stuff. Consequently, the flattened organization kind of fell flat. Uh, it didn't take off for a while. So these are parts of what you find going on in organizations when you unify them, when you get people engaged, when you spread them across each other. If you keep them siloed, what happens when budgeting comes around is you have the biggest fights in the world. You don't have a bunch of leaders sitting around the table saying, what's the best thing to do for the company? Well, maybe it's better to take $50,000 or $100,000 out of my budget and give it to marketing this year because, we're pretty well staffed and I think we can make it work. But these guys, we really need to get our name out there. See, that kind of decision making processes comes from heterogeneous interactions by everyone, everybody in the leadership across the whole organization. And then everybody gets that information pushed down. So your leaders, as you begin to replace people, as you begin to do succession planning, you're going to do that in house. So you identify these people up front, and you spend 6 months uh, doing the positive emotional intelligence interpersonal assessments on someone before they even are put into position. They're going to be looked at, they're going to be evaluated, they're going to be, they're great salespeople. They're going to, and you might find out during that assessment process over 4 or 5 months, um, that person is looking at you going, leadership is not my thing. I am not cut out. I just can't get my mind to accept this. Even with the training, I understand what you're saying. It's just not something that I like to do. And they go back and they continue to be your top salesperson. But maybe you can carve out something for them later and a structure along the lines of either training or maybe research or maybe analysis. Um, who knows? You there's lots of things you have the options to do once you clear your mind of the fact that you don't have any other options. This is the way it's got to be. Uh, you who knows? You might have an engineer who is in such a valuable job because they're creating ideas and patents and bringing them to bear, and they're generating a lot of money for the corporation as an engineer. They're not a leader, not in control of anybody, but they're generating all these patents and all this information. They may be making more than the vice president who they work for. They work under, so to speak. That's a possibility. Why wouldn't that be about if you can kind of eliminate your thinking on that? Get that resistance out of your mind. Stop thinking about that right now and think about, wow, well, how could that work? Look at all the opportunities you could create in your organization, and why people would want to stay with you and why they would want to say, I think I got some people I know that are really good that would love to work here. I know them, I vouch for them. That's what you want in your organization. You want people going out being the ambassador for your organization. I can be your ambassador or I can slaughter you, as an employee. I can do either one of those things. It's kind of contingent upon you what you want me to do as a leader. That's the power of leadership in an organization. So we've talked a whole lot. We've answered the question why. We've talked about what the differences are, and there's some significant differences. So, and I know people are sitting there going, "Oh hell no, that'll never work." And I'm I'm telling you, you need to take the positive intelligence course, and the emotional intelligence course. And by the way, that's not good communication to me. So it's not helping me. Saying I can't. Uh, so those three things are things that you want to be involved with, uh, and it's very important uh, that we somehow change this course so we're ready for this. Oh my goodness, let's see. Somebody goes, how many types of leaders exist? How many types of leaders exist? My gosh, as many as you want to put into your system. Uh, Leaders are people who lead people because it depends on the organization and the growth of the organization. And I'm trying to figure out how to get this thing resolved here. There we go. So there as many leaders as you go, but usually it's span control, control how many. Like large organizations have hundreds, maybe thousands, and small businesses may have three. And the title. But the definition of that leader is the same consistently. You're, Let me pull that person back up. Figure out how I got wrapped up away and all that other stuff and maybe covered myself. But leaders all follow the same principle, the same guideline, the same role concept. You're getting things done. If you have somebody that's working for you that you need to get things done for the organization through them, that's a leadership role. I don't care what level you are in the organization, whether you own the company or whether you are an hourly employee down there. You may even be an informal group leader, not even have the title or the money, but people call on you. They're the people who seek you out to learn how to do it or learn what to do. So that's part of it. That's part of it you want to think about from that standpoint. So uh, that's pretty much trying to think about where we are here. Okay, my let's see, my I have this uh, person who's checking in with us. Is I get it. What I want to study educational leadership. What can you suggest about this? Um, Well, one thing I would suggest is follow us. Go ahead and get on here and join our website, or I mean our YouTube channel, Building Renaissance for Leaders. Take a look at some of these books inside. Spend the $5, peruse some of these books. Uh, if you want to be an educator and leader, I could think of a better way to do it than find a company that you really, really, they have taken their education inside the company and tell them you're willing to start at whatever level you need. Now, I don't know how old you are, where your experience is, etc. But if you're just beginning, understand you always take the time to spend some time to learn. I tell some people when they come out of college, are 20, what, 22, 23, maybe 25 if they started late. Um, if you spend 5 years at an entry level position like a recruiter or like an assistant trainer or something, or anything associated with training development inside an organization, and you worked your way up in that organization for another 5 or 6 years, maybe 8 years, and stay with them and filter through all the stuff you have to put up with. Uh, you're going to find yourself being able to be either progressed up in that organization or you're going to be highly marketable in another organization. But I don't even recommend anybody for this program that doesn't have at least 10 or 15 years of leadership under their belt. Uh, uh, in many cases, they have graduate degrees because while they've gotten their experience, they've gone back to school and gotten their graduate level. So, for example, one of those people that deal with positive intelligence is Dr. Brian Grossman. LinkedIn, I'd recommend anybody get a hold of him for the positive intelligence segment. And you can get certified to coach that. But you got to remember, experience is a lot better than certification. The combination is years of experience in the field plus the qualifications. That's what makes you a good person in leadership. So you got to pay your dues some way, one way or the other. I would suggest that you get into an organization and work your way up in that organization. That's when you can come out. Uh, People straight out of school, and I've seen them go into companies with me and try to do their consulting inside the company. And you know, what normally happens is they're rejected by the leadership and the workforce in that company because they don't have the experience. In many cases, they don't have the experience that the leader that they're trying to consult with has. And that makes it extremely difficult for those people to be influential unless they're highly competent, unless they've been through a program like this program, if you go through it and you work on it it's going to take you a year to really seed comfortably. So uh, yeah, you're welcome. I see the thumbs up. Thank you for coming and joining us. I appreciate your questions. I just don't want to mislead people. That there are no quick fixes or quick solutions to be an effective leadership coach or consultant. You have to get in there and get some experience under your belt to really know what it means to have somebody work for you for 10 years and stay with you and never over 25 years of being in work, I never fired any of my staff. I never had to fire any of my staff for performance. They all moved on and went. Either they had to move with their husband or their wife, or they had to do something else, or they got promoted. Or if I didn't have a position in the company for them, to get promoted to, they went with another company, and I wrote their reference letter for them, telling them how damn good they were. And you'd be surprised, any company who has reached that point where they're stable and they're still growing people, and they're spreading these people out to other companies. In many cases, they're competitors. A lot of people look at that company as that's the kind of company I want to work for. So it has a lot of good marketing perspectives to it. And so those are some of the other things you can do in that light. But okay. You guys have a good evening. If you have other questions or comments, you can certainly put them in the comment section of this video, or you can put them into uh, my YouTube community on that Business Renaissance Leaders channel. There's a community in there, and you can go ahead and respond into that community and ask questions, and I will keep up with you there. Okay? I appreciate it very much. You have a great day.